Let's just go for it. Borderlands. Is there a more polarizing series? The looter-shooter genre has been dominated by several different series over the last 2 decades, but none of which has had an impact or identity like Borderlands. In fact, there's nothing really quite like it since its inception, nor since its release in both gameplay as well as style. The series has gone through a variety of changes while still remaining true to an identity of eccentric dialogue, quirky characters, and loot farming gameplay in a dystopian hellscape planet ruled by corporations over governments, where anarchy and a gun go a long way, but a capitalistic mindset and an iron fist go a lot farther. There's been a total of 5-ish mainline Borderlands titles, of which it's had its ups and its not so ups. A series that dominated award shows in 2012 at its best, but couldn't even scrape together a nomination as recent as 2025, with Steam charts that reflect player counts hovering at around games past. To dive into Borderlands is to dive into 2 sides of a series. One of gameplay, and the successful marriage of genres in an ultra-satisfying gameplay loop, and the other a side of character, its writing, tone, and overall presentation, whether it's for better or for worse. A series known for being punk, selling out, and losing the plot entirely depending on who you ask. What was once a series revered for its story, atmosphere, and gameplay taking huge hits in these categories. So what went wrong? What caused the series to lose its edge and plateau in the year 2025 and onward? Is there hope for the franchise in the future? Have we forgotten? What about Borderlands? Let's talk about punk rock music. The origins of punk rock can be traced back to the 1960s and 70s, with bands like the Ramones taking the forefront of a new style of music, with fast, aggressive beats and an anti-establishment worldview heavily juxtaposing against the musical landscape that was more traditionally popular at the time. It wasn't about conforming to a sound or look to sell more records. It was about full transparency and authenticity while doing it your own way. It is this attitude for standing up for what you believe in that proved to be a huge sticking point for the counterculture at the time. And I say all this to preface what I mean when I say Borderlands is punk. Hear me out. In the mid to late 2000s, realistic war shooters were on a rapid incline in popularity thanks to games like Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, with its gritty story narrative, muted earth-toned color palette, and an online arena multiplayer mode with customizable classes and kill streaks galore. It was a formula that was proving to be very successful, and with success comes money, and studios were taking notice of the realistic-ish graphics, online arena, and modern military aesthetics popularity. Even my beloved Halo couldn't help but introduce sprinting and customizable classes. The 7th generation of consoles introduced high-definition capability, and at the time, these games could be interpreted as cutting edge, and games like the Battlefield series used some of the same techniques to make the games look and feel more realistic. It is here we find ourselves with the arrival of Borderlands, a first-person shooter, yes, but not in the same vein of games like Call of Duty and Battlefield, but instead with branching skill trees and treasure hunting for better equipment like Diablo and other RPGs, thus leading Borderlands to lead the charge as the genre-defining looter-shooter video game. Alongside this unique new genre, a unique new art style was developed for the game almost 3/4 of the way through development. The use of hand-drawn textures rendered into 3D environments and given thick black outlines give the game a comic book feel as if they jumped straight off the page, commonly and incorrectly referred to as cel shading. But regardless, this art style helped distance the game from the FPS landscape that was dominating the Xbox Live servers. The final piece of the puzzle was the tone of the writing. Could the comic book art style fit alongside a grizzled war veteran spouting call signs and serious tones of a military shooter game? Yes, however, it would not fit the literal world that Borderlands exists in, the planet of Pandora. Borderlands wears its influences on its sleeve in this world, with clear inspiration being drawn from Mad Max and Star Wars A New Hope, with a prehistoric flavor sprinkled on top. A world that's been ravaged of resources by powerful companies that have long since abandoned the planet, leaving behind those who couldn't afford to leave, and only of that crowd survived by those who were crazy enough to navigate the Forsaken. This commonly takes the shape of bandits, bruisers, psycho, and midgets? 2009 was a different time, I suppose, but also Pandora's inhabitants. Take TK Baha, an optimistic man who lives by himself after losing his wife, his eyesight, and one of his legs, but remains stuck, unable to leave on his own. His attitude is upbeat and still a little off. He makes a lot of eyesight jokes even though he's blind, but the humor doesn't exaggerate upon itself.
Alright, see you soon! You don't get it, do you? It doesn't matter, just go whenever you want.
TK Baha is eccentric, but he is a character that feels capital O organic to Pandora.
Hey, thanks. I know it's rough out here, and a lot of people barely have time to help themselves, much less anybody else. Just know that your help means a whole lot.
As do many of the other inhabitants, such as Dr. Zed, the closest thing to a practicing doctor on the planet, and although his medical license has been revoked, spends time chopping up his patients and selling medical supplies through vending machines. There's Marcus, the venture capitalist arms dealer that takes no side in any given conflict and would rather opt to sell his guns to everyone as it would net him the most money on a conflict-heavy planet. I want to iterate that franchise mascot Claptrap exists as one of many Claptrap units and essentially serves as a Firestone tutorial and quirky introduction character before being relegated to alerting you about the Firestone bounty board.
Greetings, traveler! New missions are available at the Firestone bounty board.
The playable Vault Hunters themselves aren't even really that unique, with Roland, a traditional FPS soldier, Mordecai, a sniper-focused mercenary, and Brick, the heavy weapons user, basically bridging a gap between other shooter games and this one. The main exception is Lilith, with her bright orange hair and blue tattoos, stands out as a siren, which in the series has the ability to wield magical powers. But even still, she specializes in SMG-class weapons. Lilith is the most fantastical RPG-style character included in Borderlands, and I do give some credit for her inclusion, as with the art direction changing so late, it makes sense that more of the characters are based in a more grounded style of play. The Vault Hunters themselves are a part of the world in the sense that they have to come to Pandora in search of the Great Vault. Shocker. While receiving direction from a guardian angel to help guide them the right way. It is learned through Pandoran archaeologist Dr. Patricia Tanis that key fragments are needed to open the vault, and the vault itself is only to be opened once every 200 years, and surprise, surprise, that time just so happens to be right now. With a great weapon locked away inside the vault, there are others seeking key fragments hoping to claim the treasure for themselves, the primary being Commandant Steele, the leader of the Crimson Lance, which is the primary military force being backed by Atlas Corporation. The bulk of the story consists of finding the key fragments and unlocking the vault until the back end of the game, where Tanis tricks the player into keeping the keys, but is then trapped by the Crimson Lance and removed by force so Steele can open the vault herself. As it turns out, the great weapon is a monster called the Destroyer that was locked away behind the vault by an ancient race called the Iridians, and the Destroyer must become the destroyed. If it feels like I've glossed over a lot of components of the story, I really haven't. Much of the backstory and lore is told through side missions and found recordings scattered throughout Pandora.
This is the 76th day. I was woken up, hoping I was having a reoccurring nightmare. We spent more than 36 hours earlier today relocating our campsite closer to our dig site, only to be ambushed by local wildlife that's hungry coming out of hibernation. Half of my staff was eaten alive, or killed by skags. I survived by hiding under a colleague of mine who was being devoured on top of me. His name was Carl. My emotions are deadened, and I grieve for none of them. In point of fact, the only emotion I felt was that of joy. I felt joy because his chair was always more comfortable than mine. I took his chair, and then I noticed the emissive glow on the rocks at the dig site.
If the story feels familiar, it should, as it's not hard to see the direct influence of the Halo story, with an ancient race creating a structure to save others from an otherworldly force of destruction. Just replace the Forerunners with Iridians, the Flood with the Destroyer, and the Halo with the Vault. Again, the game wears its influences on its sleeve, which can be a good thing, as the cars handling like ghosts feels familiar, or the world looking like Mad Max fulfills a feeling of immersion. The music even sounds like Halo, especially the percussion, but the addition of the prehistoric elements adds a unique flavor that separates itself from science fiction worlds of Halo and Star Wars, as well as the post-apocalyptic themes of Mad Max. It's a true space western in every sense of the genre, an untamed, unconquered wild world. Borderlands 1 has aged better than many of the games from its era, as it wasn't going out chasing trends, and is loved despite its imperfections even. Its story is pretty forgettable, and at times the writing is non-existent. Its color palette still focuses on heavy, dull browns and grays like like many other games of its era, and the gameplay is clunky at times. But the looter-shooter gameplay mixed with its hand-drawn space western presentation lays a foundation for a series that was more than necessary for what it would become. As the game ends, it turns out the Guardian Angel was actually transmitting her signal through a satellite owned by the Hyperion Company, hinting at the premise of a sequel. In 1991, Seattle rock band Nirvana released their sophomore album Nevermind to near instant success. It was an album with gritty, distorted electric guitars and drums that roared like thunder, but also included a lot softer, almost pop-like melodies as well as acoustic ballads. This culminated in a record that dominated airwaves, MTV, and Guitar Centers for years to come. The lyrics ranged from soft, personal, vulnerable, to aggression and frustration. This album was a lot different from their last release, Bleach, as Bleach was a lot more raw and unrefined, bearing a lot of resemblance to the Seattle punk and metal scene of the 80s, while still showing a lot of promise before truly finding and refining their sound. See where I'm going with this? Borderlands 2 built on the concepts that the first game introduced and launched the series into incredible commercial heights and the peak of the franchise as a whole. The first thing that pops out is the improvements to the art style, as its inclusion in the first game was very late into development, but with a blank sheet in front of them, Gearbox was able to design distinct, unique areas with vibrant color and individual themes that really showed off what the art design was capable of. Nobody would argue that the atmosphere of the first game isn't phenomenal, but within the refinement of the sequel style, it's clear that the vision of the series was improving, further separating themselves from the dull army tones of its era. The gunplay was smoother and more refined, with the weapon manufacturers having more identity to their given craft, and the Vault Hunters could specialize into more than just one weapon or weapon types unique to their character skill trees. The Vault Hunters weren't just generic army guys, they were unique army guys, except for you, Axton, but the sniper is now a ninja. The big guy is more of a brute than an army guy, or mercenary, and the siren is still a siren, all pitted against a villain strongly considered the best in the series, and some would even consider one of the best villains in gaming history, Handsome Jack. Handsome Jack as a villain falls under the bad guy that thinks he's the good guy trope that isn't original to his character, but it is his character arc combined with his personality delivered by a one-of-a-kind performance from Damian Clark that makes him so memorable.
Oh, Jesus. I'm sorry. Thank God. I was so worried you'd killed those bandits before they could murder old Gran. And you know what? Now I don't even have to pay him, so thanks, loser.
He believes himself to be the hero of Pandora and is looking to cleanse the planet of all of its bandit filth and places himself firmly at the helm and has assumed the role of dictator. He's got a lot on his plate as a dictator and head of the Hyperion Corporation, so at first his relationship with the Vault Hunters is apathetic as he assumes the player, like all other threats that have confronted him, will be swiftly dealt with after throwing large quantities of cash around to solve the problem. His natural charisma and larger-than-life bravado contrasts heavily with what we've come to associate with the powerful, ruthless leaders in our history textbooks. However, his demeanor changes as the story progresses. Condescending quips turn to irritated jabs and finally full-blown hatred-imbued insults. You come to learn that Jack has enslaved the Guardian Angel, aka Angel, aka his own daughter, harnessing her powers as a siren and amplifying them with an element called iridium. And though Angel has helped her father, she eventually betrays him. That leads to her death at the hands of the player.
Dad, I have to tell you something. You're an asshole.
Angel! No, Angel!
Jack doesn't see this as anything other than the nasty Vault Hunters killing his daughter, whom he was protecting against those who were looking to take advantage of her power for themselves. It's this sort of deranged irony that is so deeply rooted in fabrication that even if no one else around him believes in what he's doing, Jack still believes the lies he's telling in order to protect himself as well as his own actions. His use of humor isn't that of trying to make the player laugh, but rather trying to make himself laugh. Take the butt stallion bit.
I'm racking my brain trying to think of a name for that diamond pony I bought. I was going to call it Piss for Brains in honor of you, but that just feels immature. Hey, maybe Butt Stallion? Nah, that's even worse. I'll tell you what, I'll give it some more thought.
The joke isn't laid out as herder, butt stallion funny. It's rather about how insignificant the Vault Hunters are to Jack. That he can buy a pony made of diamonds and give it a stupid name because he's that filthy fucking rich. It plays to his swagger as well as mimicking the first game's tone of only the deranged and crazy Pandorans remaining to inhabit, or in Jack's case, take over the planet. Speaking of the humor, 2 is really where the trademark Borderlands comedy comes into its own, spearheaded by Anthony Birch, the main writer. Birch really started to ramp up the humor in Borderlands 2, which can be a very tricky tone to navigate. Has the humor aged well for a game that was trying to be funny in 2011?
Bonafart. All of them. That's right, we're calling them Bonafarts now. Just kill a few of them or something. I don't care anymore.
That's a somewhat subjective opinion, because while there are some jokes that prompt its age, I would like to interject that sort of meme humor was integral to the success of the game. The internet in the early 2010s was the sort of end of the Wild West eras of the internet. The days of pirating music and movies were falling to the wayside as corporations started to realize exactly how much money could be made on the internet, but there was still a large presence of millennial-dominated media generating most of this market share. It wouldn't be until later in the decade that brands would start to use their Twitter pages to try and talk like actual people instead of just promotional robots. As someone who's on the cusp of Gen Z, I spent a great deal of time on addicting games and looking up to Ian Hecox and Anthony Padilla, while also being a little more internet fluent than the adults in my life, such as my teachers. This gave early internet meme culture an almost punk feel, not in the classic expression of the term as it was used in the 20th century, but rather the feeling of wayward youthful contumaciousness and renegade attitude that felt exclusive to the younger generations. I can't knock Borderlands 2 for including the annoying orange skin and references to Rage comics, because I used to watch the annoying orange and scroll through Rage comics. So I speak the language this game is communicating in. And of course it didn't age well. Half the memes that were included were out of date within a year of the game coming out, and plenty of the pop culture references have dated the game in a Gex type way.
Note to self, don't drink tap water at Jerry Garcia's.
There were plenty of moments during my playthroughs of the game where I would roll my eyes at something that over the course of 15 years has become unintentionally cringe. Claptrap's inclusion in this game shines as the prototypical Claptrap personality of pathetically lonely, yet lovably optimistic that turned it into the face of the franchise. There was even a canon event where Handsome Jack destroyed all of the other Claptrap units because he thought they were all annoying, leaving this one to be the one true mascot to irk them all. It's actually kind of fitting that Claptrap is written as a cringe fest in pre-cringe meme culture character, with most of, if not every playable and non-playable character all just getting annoyed by his personality. And when viewed upon this way, Claptrap making a comment about loving dubstep and beatboxing a song to prove it actually ages well the further dubstep gets pushed into obscure lexicon and becomes a relic of its time. Ace McShooty also gets brought up as a prime example of this, but it's hard to describe that this was a sentiment shared across so many people during the Call of Duty takeover. You just had to be there. A mission where the sole objective was to shoot a guy who is begging to be shot in the face is a quick moment of comic relief, whose legacy far outweighs its mission. I mean, it literally takes less than 10 seconds to complete this. He is meant to contrast the heavier, mainline missions that involve a capitalistic fascist enslaving his own daughter, forcing Bloodwing to be cruelly experimented on, and shooting Roland in the back, killing him on the spot. The Borderlands 2 story is virtually identical to the first game from a conceptual standpoint, with the leader of a corporate military entity trying to seize the power of the Vault, which in both cases end up being some form of monster. But where Borderlands 2 shines is in its ability to give personality and individualism to that experience. Anthony Birch took the tone of Pandora's Lunatics and adapted it in a way that gave Borderlands an essence that no other games on the market had. And it resonated with people. Just look at the awards it was nominated for and won. Any humor-driven media is at a disadvantage against time, repeated playthroughs, and every funny guy with a Twitter account. But what Borderlands 2 did accomplish as a quote-unquote funny game shouldn't be misinterpreted as poorly aged, but rather as a time capsule that those who were there to play it on release got to listen to the language Borderlands spoke, free of any corporate sanitizing and mouthwashing. I mean, they still call the little guys midgets. When met with the meteoric success of Nevermind, Nirvana, or rather their label, had to determine whether or not the band found true, lasting success, or were fizzling out to be a flash in the pan after riding out their 15 minutes of fame. Regardless, the labels wanted to capitalize on the prosperities, but albums take a while to create. It just so happened that Nirvana had a myriad of songs that they recorded that didn't make it on the releases of either Bleach or Nevermind. So the Suit and Ties commissioned a deal with the band to release them, so long as the band got to retain creative control of the artwork. Thus, the compilation album of Incesticide was released, with a myriad of songs from different recording sessions, as well as personnel, most notably the drummers. It's an album for all intents and purposes, but not in the way of getting in the studio to record the next batch of songs, but instead building upon a foundation of explosive success to maximize public memory retention. As well, it gives the fans something to chew on before their next actual release of a true album. The notion is mimicked in a weirdly familiar way with Borderlands, the pre-sequel. Borderlands 2 had exploded the popularity of the series to new heights, but Gearbox was burnt out after working on 2 Borderlands games in back-to-back development cycles, and CEO Randy Pitchford claimed that the team wouldn't make Borderlands 3 until they knew what it was going to be. In the meantime, the success of Borderlands 2 was not to be ignored, so to give fans something to stay occupied between the releases of 2 and 3, Gearbox commissioned a game to bridge this gap and satisfy the still hungry Borderlands players wanting more than just DLC. Gearbox, however, wouldn't be running the show, but handing the responsibility off to 2K Australia. Seeing that there was already a game engine, world, and formula for them to work off of, the game was a shoo-in to be a fantastic follow-up for Borderlands 2. Bummer. The pre-sequel had all of the tools it needed to succeed. The setting of Pandora's moon, Elpis, felt natural. Giving the moon's inhabitants an Australian accent and calling it a moon accent is a cute and amusing enough way for the game to handle logistical challenges in its voice recording, and helped give Elpis its own personality distinct of Pandora's lunatics. And speaking of lunatics, it based the story off the rise of everyone's new favorite villain, Handsome Jack. Specifically, how he rose to power during the build into Borderlands 2's story, and Anthony Birch even made a return to the writing room to help keep the game more consistent with 2. So what went wrong? Well, nothing really went wrong, as I think loads of people rightfully loved this game despite its blemishes. The story really lives up to the name being a pre-sequel, as it takes place before the events of the second game, but takes place as a flashback as the Crimson Resistance has captured one of Jack's former personnel. You are nothing more than a hired gun to Jack, and what starts with helping an innocent code yuppie snowballs into more and more morally ambiguous decisions that you don't have any other choice but to take part in. Though it's not like these decisions affect the player more than they affect the change in Jack's personality. You, the player, already know how Jack is going to turn out after everything is said and done. So it's not a matter of making the decisions that will lead to Jack's mad villainy, but more or less strapping in for the ride and doing what he asks because he's your boss. It's a sit back and watch the fireworks sort of experience, and you're just dying to see the big finale. Its writing is still Anthony Birch, and having the success in Borderlands 2 gave a green light to continue the Birch style, which has its benefits such as keeping the tone and humor consistent with the previous installment's style. The drawbacks are kept pretty minimal with the route that was taken, at least from a writing standpoint. Though the cracks in the series' foundation can be spotted as early as Borderlands 2, it starts chipping away at the identity of the franchise in the pre-sequel.
Did my accent throw you off? I meant to say,
I need y'all to help me fix up some inspirational posters, y'all. Donuts, cowboys, homophobia.
I don't really have much beef with this game. Seeing elements come to life, such as the origin of the Hyperion robot voice, was an amusing enough romp that added flavor to Borderlands 2 retroactively. The main villain, while serving her purpose, is also incredibly forgettable, like Commandant Steele forgettable. The first mainline Borderlands title after 2 would always have big shoes to follow villain-wise, and Zarpedon works well for what she needs to fulfill as the antagonist to Jack while on Elpis and the Hyperion space station. Another problem I have is how to make the moon interesting. Moons aren't really known for their biodiversity other than rock, cold rock, and space station. It's all very gray. And that ends up being a drawback to the game's environment more than anything else, which makes it, again, like the first game, harder to focus on some of the zanier gameplay elements when it all starts to blend together. Elpis also doesn't have an atmosphere with breathable oxygen, which means you'll constantly be needing to get inside breathable structures or opening small air pockets on the surface to, breathe, as well as fill your Oz kit, which just acts as the breathable tanks while on the surface of Elpis. This is a neat idea, but in my own experience, I felt that this gameplay element that made traveling feel like a nuisance in the early game became practically non-existent due to a combination of having a decent enough Oz kit and spending more time in breathable environments such as space stations and less time on the moon's surface itself. It has a net negative impact on the experience in total, as the game isn't built as an Oz kit-centered experience and nags as extra baggage during its missions. The lackluster mission design also contributes to some of the pre-sequel's shortcomings. Mission design in Borderlands has never been the reason it became so popular, but in the pre-sequel, it felt as though many artificial roadblocks would pop up to prevent the task from being completed. Take the mission Intelligences of Artificial Persuasion, which has by far the biggest offense in the go here, press that, oh wait, doesn't work, now go there and fix that, oh wait, before you go there, go here and unclog this type mission design, which doesn't really do much, but feels like it pads out the fetch quest time that is spent without any meaning in the story driving aspect, and even to the extent of the looting gameplay aspects as well. This mission is by far the worst perpetrator in the game, but many of the missions follow this clearing roadblocks to reveal another roadblock structure. Couple that with the writing style that, one, lean on Australia-centric media, and two, is starting to try to divert its tone away from the lull random memes and more into its own style.
Access denied. Scans reveal subject is a racist hot dog.
Whoa, wait, I'm full of hate! I was sure the racist hot dog were just me, Colonel. I'm racist!
Is the pre-sequel bad? No, it's Borderlands. It would take a lot to really sour people on the gameplay, and the addition of lasers and cryo weapons is an addition that pays off well. In my opinion, the pre-sequel accomplishes its title of being a game that takes place before Borderlands 2, and gives more Handsome Jack content while also trying to be a bit more innovative. It almost feels like a large DLC rather than a standalone game, and acts as something of a cross between the first two games put together. Its scope and atmosphere are in line with the first game, while its writing and gameplay follow the footsteps of the second. It does what it wants decently without overstaying its welcome, though personally to me it feels like dessert when you're already full. I wish the Nirvana album analogy could be continued with Borderlands 3, as it aligns very well with the first 2.5 Borderlands games, but alas, not every analogy gets to be so spot on. No, Borderlands 3 doesn't earn its own quirky musical analogy, so I'm going to just get right into it. If Borderlands exists as a punk ethos, then Borderlands 3 exists as a shirt with the word punk written across the chest sold at Target.
This car is like punk rock.
It handholds you into believing that the image that the game is trying to convey is not shown to the players, but told to the players. The vehicle for this is the writing and the deliveries of many of the voice lines. Take the character of Vaughn, who at best I can only assume his design is meant to be a little annoying, but also a sort of lovable romp, sort of like a puppy that doesn't really know right from wrong. But where puppies have soft bellies and an unconditional love for its caretaker, Vaughn says the word bro, like a lot. And that's it. That's the joke. He says bro a lot.
You got this, bro. You got this, I think. We're tight, bro. Super tight. Like, bro tight.
I'm all in, bro. Bro, it's been an indeterminate amount of time. Now let's bro chat. We still got hope, bro.
You ready, bro?
You want to ride sometime? You just let me know, bro. Bro trip!
He also likes to frequently talk about his muscle, like his rock solid abs and how in shape and muscular he is.
Cardio live! So, how's my ass look from back there?
For the entire fucking game. And this isn't a one-off side character that speaks in a gimmick and is forgotten about the minute he's off screen. He is one of the first characters met in Borderlands 3, meaning you will have to hear bro this and six-pack that for hours at a time. Does the joke improve and get funnier as you hear it? No. Are the jokes even original? No, they aren't. And that doesn't just go for Vaughn, who at his core is just making fun of Jersey Shore characters 6 years too late. You are meant to laugh at him, not because of him, a trait that up until this point has been exclusive to enemies and Claptrap. There's jokes about coffee cup sizes, which weren't funny before being put into a Borderlands game. There's a legitimate, that sounded better in my head. If this is ironic, I'm having a hard time picking up on it. I'd like to talk about something I've deemed as the Tony Stark effect. Tony Stark is played by Robert Downey Jr. in the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Unlike many other superhero characters, the Tony Stark portrayed by RDJ has a quick wit and isn't afraid of snarky one-liners. It fits his character very well as the self-proclaimed genius billionaire playboy philanthropist. It's an arrogance wrapped in a truth that he is as untouchable as Iron Man, even if he doesn't have the suit on. And when I watched the first 2 Iron Man movies, I loved this portrayal of a less gritty and more personable, at times funny superhero. Well, it seemed like the rest of the world also loved this because this sort of humor began to appear in the other Avengers, whether it fit their characters or not. This brand of Tony Stark humor could be used for a quick and easy tension-breaking laugh, irrelevant to whether or not it's warranted for the current scene. This sort of humor then began to pop up in various other popular media, with other offenders including, but not limited to, Anthem, Forspoken, Skate, Stranger Things, and even Star Wars not being safe from Marvel's writing influence. It is thus to no surprise that this I want to be Tony Stark style humor that arose right after the release of the second Borderlands made its way into the third. And it's a shame because Handsome Jack, in some ways, already embodied these traits without overstepping his humorous side to let other emotions take the center stage when necessary. Now, this wouldn't be so bad in Borderlands 3 if it wasn't for the fact that every single character is trying to be the comic relief funny guy at all times. I can get behind the notion that Anthony Birch at least had intention with his interpretation of the original Borderlands' wacky tones and punched in 2010 Reddit memes while doing so. Borderlands 3 feels like a twice removed interpretation, though this time with 2018 Twitter lingo. Don't get me wrong, they both aged poorly, but instead of jokes from the front page of the internet, Borderlands 3 is crammed wall to wall with jokes that feel like I'm scrolling through someone else's Twitter timeline. At times, I caught myself finishing punchlines because I had already heard these jokes somewhere else before, or the game felt the need to explain the joke to me like a Family Guy cutaway in Season 18. Imagine if TK Baha went from
Alright, see you soon!
to I'll see you later. Get it? Because I can't see? Because I'm blind? So I can't see? Instead of just relying on the player to be able to use inferences and implications to fill out the joke instead. Not everyone has to understand every joke. That's what creates levels in the humor. The art of subtlety goes a long way. The game goes through great lengths to tell me how funny and punk it is. But to me, the most punk part of the game is the graffiti the bandits and raiders have painted on the walls that end up getting used as yellow paint markers for guided pathways. Like, as a society, are we really not above making fun of coffee culture at this point? I think any joke that can be made about, don't talk to me till I've had my morning cup of coffee, or ordering a mumbo jumbo chocolatey chippity frappadappuccino has already been cashed. I can't tell if this was genuinely how the writing style turned out, or if some detached chairman thought, well, the kids loved the humor in Borderlands 2, so let's make Borderlands 3 another funny game. This is also apparent from the over-the-top voice deliveries that come off with the impression the delivery is being used to help make the joke land, because it's delivered in such a boisterous way. What I'm supposed to believe is a character ends up coming across as a caricature with exaggerated features that resembles the likeness of quirky characters of old. Don't get me wrong again, this works well with a character like Wainwright Jacobs, who is a caricature of America's Southern families of generational wealth, but end up feeling like one of the more grounded characters in the entire game. His voice lines range from calm, welcoming Southern hospitality to a verbose, blustery Piedmont echoing that of Foghorn Leghorn when he's angry or just trying to make a point.
Lilith, Wainwright Jacobs at your service. I'm sorry to report that those COV zealots have kidnapped Hammerlock. And it seems they're here for me. One step closer and I'll whoop you with lead. I'll emblazon my family crest on your craven ass.
He doesn't just go from hollering like a loudmouth hick into yelling like a loudmouth hick, which thus contributes to the lack of eye rolls I give when I do hear the more pompous deliveries. It's all in his range. Other characters don't fare as well as this. Like, yeah, Tyrene Calypso's voice is meant to mimic the modern streaming "what is going on guys" cadence.
What is up, brothers and sisters? Got
Queen Cyrene coming to you live.
But like Vaughn, this joke delivery is stretched throughout the entirety of the game and sours on me after only a little while. Even when she's not streaming, there's still a sort of forced delivery that I'm just not a fan of. And you know, maybe that means it's good, but I still think there could have been a bit more nuance with her voice lines.
First time I saw Siren was my trip to Athenas.
And don't even get me started on you. It also doesn't help that the game, being this jam-packed with non-stop, off-the-wall humor, tries to draw from other emotions a few times, and almost every single time it doesn't land. Time that could be spent familiarizing myself with the characters and their relationship to Pandora's chaos is spent wisecracking for a quick chuckle. Gearbox found themselves between a rock and a hard place when having to come up with antagonists that follow the act of Handsome Jack. You can't just make another Handsome Jack story because his character arc has ended. There's no more story to tell, but you have to recapture the lightning in a bottle that made him so polarizing to begin with.
This one guy in New Haven, right? City's burning, people are dying left and right, yada yada yada. This jackhole rushes me with a spoon. A freaking spoon, and I'm dying laughing, right? So I scoop out his stupid little eyeballs with it, and its kids are all, and you can't see where he's going, he's bumping into stuff, and anyway, I don't know, maybe he had to be there. The moral is, you're a total bitch.
The decision to wait 7 years between games to refine and hone in on what these characters needed to accomplish to set themselves apart from just another baddie is a good thing, as crunch and rushed development cycles to push out a new product has become more and more commonplace in the current gaming landscape. So what did they come up with?
But you're all like, what's up with those husks?
The story in 3 really pushes the Sirens to the most forefront they've been in the series, but in 3 you have 5.5 different Sirens all at some point taking their moment in the spotlight of the story, unless there's no Amara in your party, as she's the playable Siren in this game. Despite having unique lines of dialogue for each Vault Hunter, the cutscenes run in real time right past you as if your character isn't even a part of the story. Tyreen and Troy Calypso, aka the Calypso Twins, are glorified Twitch streamers, Instagram influencers, or whatever internet celebrity buzzwords that can be strung together. They are supposed to be the worst of the Paul brothers and the David Dobrik's of engagement baiting, content farming, parasocial worshipped clout chasers, and during their live streams that somehow happen on the desolate planet of Pandora, have amassed a cult following that they call the Children of the Vault. And admittedly, this isn't the worst setup for what the game is trying to accomplish. Tyreen is a Siren written as the attention-seeking, spotlight-hungry influencer in front of the camera, while Troy is a sort of parasite Siren that depends on the sharing of powers absorbed by his sister and handles more of the behind-the-scenes parts of their streaming empire, though isn't totally opposed to the limelight either. This dependency Troy has on Tyreen creates a great dynamic between the twins as they both require themselves to rely on the other, while neither of them would if they didn't have to. They were conjoined twins, so there's a logical explanation as to why Troy's more of a pseudo-Siren. Yes, their writing is over the top, and it certainly doesn't do the characters any favors, but it makes sense to some degree why Tyreen always talks so over the top. She's literally referenced as God Queen. How could that not go to her head? The twins do things like take Lilith's powers and kill Maya, the Siren from Borderlands 2, in an unceremonious way to protect her apprentice Ava, who garnered her own fair share of hate. She's a kid, like Tiny Tina in Borderlands 2, and both are written as such. Tina is a lol random demolition expert that talks like,
"Oh damn, you looking good, ladies."
The personality she has is good for that of a side character in the story, and doesn't really overextend her stay, specifically in 2. Her parents sacrificed themselves for her at a young age, so her obsession with explosives is survival for her, and it's all she knows to make sense in this fucked up hellscape she lives in. Ava is also a kid, who has a bit more involvement with the plot as the apprentice to Maya, who somehow knows she'll become a Siren one day. Ava is written as impatient, and has a fiery passion for becoming a Vault Hunter. Okay, pretty valid for teenage behavior, but plays a more pivotal role in the actual elements of the story, including getting Maya killed and then getting the keys to the Crimson Resistance handed to her after blaming everything on Lilith, and whose growth comes from only being told it was Troy who killed Maya, not Lilith. Ava's arc had the potential for one of the better stories to be told in this installment, but lacks any sort of meaningful depth, and whose change of personality comes from a single conversation with Tannis several hours later. I struggled to connect with any time that this this game was trying to present darker tones, and believe me, there are attempts here. Too often, meaningful character interactions were substituted for happy-go-lucky riff-raffing and goofing that just never allowed me to latch onto any characters, as more often than not, I was already soured on them after a few interactions. At least the gunplay of this game is the best in the series, or at least up until this point. That part of Borderlands is almost impossible to fuck up, so much so that despite all of its flaws, Borderlands 3 is a game that I do want to return to do another run, as the gunplay is satisfying, and I do like the increased legendary drops. The gold loot dopamine rush is addicting, and I love the amount of modifiers and frequency that they appear to allow for maximum fuckery. At the end of the day, isn't that what Borderlands is about? Getting your buddies together to watch the numbers go up and the colors change from gray to gold over the course of a playthrough? There are mods to remove dialogue, because under all the flesh, Borderlands 3 has a skeleton of a game that is as solid as steel. Get like comment.
So Borderlands 3, I forgive you. Just as I hope you can forgive me for my harsh tone. It's only because I care. And while this may be viewed as a low point for the series, that means there's only one way to go from here, and that's up. So what's next? What have you got for us after Borderlands 3? Should have seen that coming.
Borderlands 4 released, I guess, and actually sold surprisingly quick at launch. And I have to clarify surprisingly, because everything from Borderlands 3 writing to new Tales from the Borderlands to the dumpster fire movie release were all received poorly compared to the great Borderlands 2. And Gearbox did what any studio does after poor releases, after having all-time classics. Announce that you're going back to your roots and fundamentally aligning your team with what made the series so beloved in the first place. Alright, Gearbox, I'll bite. How does Borderlands return to the series' roots? Is it by raising up the immersive atmosphere of the planet Kairos? Well, sort of. Instead of Pandora, Borderlands takes place on Kairos after Lilith teleported Elpis over it, revealing its location that's been kept obstructed by the evil Timekeeper. Yeah, okay, Strider. And the story consists of the new Vault Hunters helping to form and lead a rebellion against the Time Whatever, who can talk to and control those on the planet through neck bolts that lead to the death of the Crimson Resistance rebel RJ in the opening hour. It's a fairly tame plot for maybe 80% of the main story's runtime, with a bulk of the playtime consisting of going to 3 separate regions on the map and questing whatever necessary to gain the trust of the people and add them to your resistance before taking on the final area. The regions themselves consist of a seamless open world, which on one end feels like a natural progression for Borderlands, but it does, to me, lose a bit of that Borderlands flavor. The environments are beautiful when traversing, but essentially culminate in grassland, mountain, desert, and city biomes, with some minor exceptions along the way. And I have to say that subduing the story to focus on an atmospheric world is exactly what I'd expect from Gearbox toning down the series from its past mistakes. It even feels like Halo again, only this time it's Halo Infinite instead of the Bungie trilogy. Grapple hooks for traversal, meshed with the sliding and bounding from 3, flow well once you get the hang of it. And I even enjoyed the new healing mechanic, which is a quality of life feature that may make it difficult to return to older games after finally getting accustomed to it after hours of adjusting to its inclusion. It also gives another slot in the inventory to watch for purple and gold drops, which have been toned down a bit from 3's borderline excessive legendary drops, but not as sparse as the first few games, finding a decent middle ground. I am a bit sick of the UI changes, as Borderlands 2 really had that shit down, and the changes even in 3, but especially in 4, never became intuitive for me. And I wished that some things were left in its simplicity in order to make it more readable and user-friendly. Also, why in the hell did they choose to make the seamless open-world Borderlands the one where they remove the minimap entirely? Did they watch the Rasputin minimap video and decide that it was better for immersion? I understand the idea, but during mainline quests, I'm not looking to lose myself in an immersive world. I'm trying to navigate to the quest without constantly pausing the game to make sure I'm on the right track, and oh look, I missed my turn. Super. And look, I get it. It's an open world game,
You want the player to get lost in the exploration, but this game isn't Breath of the Wild. There's outposts to take out, safe houses to capture, and contract missions. It's more akin to Far Cry, which again, if we go back to the tonal roots of the series, was one of the games that Borderlands was meant to stand apart from. With the wacky side missions, there's these Ubisoft time fillers squeezed into the world in a way that isn't present in other games. Smaller, more segmented map designs. The open world isn't filled with shit to do, it's filled with pockets of enemies and scattered cover next to other pockets of enemies. Characters return from previous games, which is a trend that pretty much stuck this far into the series. Zane and Amara returned from Borderlands 3. I played Flak, so I didn't really know what to expect, though they did have their moments. The love story between Zane and Levane was endearing at times. Learning about the past of the chaotic, hot-headed Zane and the poised and elegant Levane wasn't just a one-off throwaway gag, but a seed planted to blossom into meaningful character interaction was amusing to experience in real time. They had a past. You learn why their love didn't work out, never truly forgetting small details about the other that only get noted through intimacy, and rekindling lost feelings for one another is one of the better and more meaningful stories presented in the series. Other facets of the story are okay, pretty much helping give a voice to the voiceless, except Claptrap, who was more or less lobotomized except for the beginning of the game. He doesn't stick around for long after the first area directly after the introduction, which I assume is because people find Claptrap to be annoying. I also found the character of Squint to have a lot of missed potential. He is one of the NPCs in the Carcadia district and falls under the formerly rich Electi umbrella. He has a military title with no military experience, citing that supper clubs are more his specialty, and is in general the type of out-of-touch rich kid that you're kinda just meant to point and laugh at. It's the type of one-dimensional characterization found in 3 that's bled into this game. Haha, stupid rich kid doesn't know how to shoot a gun. And he's generally as annoying as someone like Vaughn. Okay, maybe not Vaughn, but along the lines of Vaughn. Squint, however, does start to get some semblance of competence as the story progresses, and eventually being brought with Zane during the Carcadia story, which leads to a moment to where the player needs to act fast and save Squint or risk losing him at the hands of Driller Hole? Alright, that's kind of funny. 2 fundamental problems. 1, Squint was only starting to be built up as something more than just a rich kid with some feelings of empathy starting to form, but there wasn't a strong enough connection that would have warranted unintentionally letting him get killed. And 2, this happens immediately after the boss is killed, and your Borderlands brain has been trained to immediately loot the legendaries after every boss fight since the first entry of the series. I let Squint die, not because I thought he deserved it or thought it would have been funny. It was because of my tunnel vision to chase a bag that I only realized once it was too late. Furthermore, you don't even get punished for Squint's death, as Zane is the one who takes full responsibility. So what does Squint's death actually accomplish for me? Well, nothing. It doesn't really impact the story. Maybe if there was a choice between either saving him and grabbing a guaranteed legendary, it would have had more weight. Saving Squint would have made him eternally grateful and start to take his duties more seriously, turning him into a strong ally, while taking the gun causes Levane and the other Electi to look down upon you for your greed. It could have been a real intersecting moment between the story and the gameplay, something not often seen within the Borderlands franchise, which is a bit of a disappointment in the missed opportunity that relegated Squint to a Borderlands 3 reject character. What I find to be the biggest offense of Borderlands is that the punkness that's been established was washed away by the interpretations of 3, and thus the implementations of the characters in 4. The series, known for being edgy and out there, was so far gone by its 3rd iteration that fans were justifiably pushing back significantly, and Gearbox listened. It's not a problem that Gearbox was listening to their fan base. That's something more studios should do, and I'm sure many developers wished they could do. But shying away from the boundary that they've been pushing at with each entry removes a Borderlands-ness to the experience. The Calypso twins were annoying, yes, nobody is going to fight back against that, but at least I remembered who they were as I played. The Timekeeper, in comparison, was so tame and restricted, generic even in his presentation, because if they went as bombastic as the Calypso twins, they thought people would hate him. People thought Claptrap was annoying, so they relegated him back down to a stripped-down side character with screen time that dwindles as the game progresses, instead of trying to incorporate the little guy in engaging and borderline cute situations where you can't help but feel a mix of sadness, pity, and cringe at his missions and dialogue. Claptrap is the mascot of the series after all. Not Lilith, not the psychos doing finger guns, it's Claptrap. It's always been Claptrap. Gearbox played it safe with Borderlands 4, which is something that they never seemed to want to do aside from renaming some of the less culturally appropriate terms. The suit and ties have a nasty habit of looking at numbers when assessing what made a piece of art so popular.
Nirvana's music resonated with millions, but ultimately it was Kurt Cobain's vulnerable and at times poetic lyrics that spoke to entire generations of people. This wasn't manufactured pop music or the overblown glam rock acts of before that dominated top 40 charts. This was a form of expression that came from a real, authentic place.
Borderlands may not ever recover from Handsome Jack-itis. That is to say, the series' peak may be long in the past, with each entry doomed to fail any expectations set over a decade ago, only fighting against time and nostalgia. Perhaps Borderlands 5 will put the series back at the forefront of the gaming realm. Maybe people are tired of the looter-shooter formula. What was a unique and genre-defining series now has to battle it out with the likes of Destiny, The Division, Battle Royales, extraction shooters, etc. The explosion that Borderlands went through put it in a position where it now has to try and make everyone happy with a product that is, well, a product, and not a piece of art that includes genuine developer personal thank yous in the credits because it was meaningful, not tradition. This has got to be the first Borderlands retrospective to come out and not use Ain't No Rest for the Wicked in its background instrumental because I don't want whatever label Cage the Elephant is signed to decide that they can throw ads on my videos and siphon whatever they deem as theirs. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Cage the Elephant didn't agree to have their song in a Borderlands game so they could throw the book at people using their songs in video essays. How is a series with not one, but 3 separate instances where a man is insinuating suicide on the front cover of the box supposed to exist in the unalive vocabulary era of trying to monetize everything on the internet? Kids just don't make violent flash games like they used to, man. As a society, we've rightfully realized that being edgy and punching down on others may not always make for the best comedy with widespread appeal, and I shouldn't have to explain why that's a good thing. Where does Borderlands need to go after a series of DLCs for its most recent release? Therein lies the golden solution. I'm glad they didn't just pump out a shitty live service Border Battle Pass in a place that allows for hella skins to be released in a variety of colors. That is the norm nowadays. A far cry from the couch co-op shared experience which is phased out of the mainstream. Plenty of games on the market have their own version of quirky and off-the-cuff dialogue. The world left Borderlands behind, and it's done everything in its power to keep up with a rapidly changing market and player base. No bullshit, the formula of Borderlands will always be fun, especially when played with friends. But with nothing to keep me around unless I want to spend additional money on top of the already $70 game for more content. Borderlands will be relegated to a fond memory I had growing up on the Xbox 360 and maybe a one-off playthrough when a friend gets the looter shooter bug that results in an unfinished playthrough because, let's face it, schedules and tastes don't line up like they used to.
Despite the incessant ramblings of their CEO on Twitter, I will always root for Borderlands because, well, Randy, it's not the fans, man. It's the man. Also, I had to factory reset my computer once to get Borderlands 4 running. What the fuck was that about? Then you're gonna get on Twitter telling me to bump my shit up? I have a 3070, that should be fine. I'm not trying to run it on ultra graphics, just enough to make it look a little bit pretty. No wonder why everyone still plays Borderlands 2 instead of 3 and 4. I mean, what the fuck, man?